The shot rang out across the dusty main street of Sweetwater Springs, silencing the usual bustle of the frontier town as Lily O'Malley stood frozen, blood seeping through her torn sleeve. The year was 1876, and the Arizona Territory was as unforgiving as the men who sought to tame it. She hadn't asked for trouble, certainly hadn't asked for what Thomas Blackwell and his gang were claiming, but in a town where a woman's reputation was as valuable as gold, accusations could be as deadly as bullets. "You all know what she is," Blackwell shouted, his voice carrying across the stunned onlookers who had scattered to the edges of the street. "The way she dresses, the way she talks to men she was asking for it," the gathered crowd murmured, some nodding in agreement. Lily clutched her wounded arm, eyes scanning desperately for any friendly face among the sea of judgment. That's when she saw him, a tall figure emerging from the saloon, thumbs hooked casually in his belt loops, a weathered Stetson pulled low over his eyes. "No, she didn't," came the steady reply, cutting through the tension like a knife. The crowd parted as Gabriel James stepped forward, his spurs jingling with each deliberate stride. "And I reckon you owe the lady an apology, Blackwell." Gabriel wasn't looking for trouble when he rode into Sweetwater Springs 3 days prior. After years driving cattle up from Texas, fighting in the war, and drifting from town to town, he'd seen enough violence to last several lifetimes. But something about the way the woman stood chin up despite the fear in her eyes stirred something long dormant in his chest. Blackwell spat on the ground. "Stay out of this, cowboy. This ain't your fight." "Made it my fight when you pulled that trigger," Gabriel replied, his hand hovering near his holster. "A man who shoots an unarmed woman deserves what's coming to him." Lily stared at the stranger, wondering why this man would risk his life for someone he didn't know. In her 22 years, few had ever stood up for her. Blackwell's face contorted with rage. "You don't know what she did, don't much care," Gabriel interrupted. "Whatever it was doesn't warrant shooting her in broad daylight." The standoff continued for what felt like an eternity. Lily could hear her own heartbeat, could feel the blood trickling down her arm, soaking into the fabric of her modest dress. She had come west after her parents died, hoping to make a new life teaching at the schoolhouse. Instead, she found herself caught in Blackwell's sights after refusing his advances at the town social the previous evening. "Sheriff's coming," someone called out, and sure enough, the sound of boots pounding the boardwalk heralded Sheriff Miller's arrival. What in tarnation is happening here? The lawman demanded, his weathered face flushed from exertion. "This man shot Miss O'Malley," Gabriel stated plainly, not taking his eyes off Blackwell. "She was," Blackwell started. "She wasn't," Gabriel cut him off. "And there are 20 witnesses who saw him draw first." Sheriff Miller looked between the two men, then at the wounded schoolteacher. "That true, Miss O'Malley?" Lily nodded, finding her voice at last. "Yes, Sheriff. Mr. Blackwell approached me as I was leaving the mercantile. When I refused to entertain his suggestions, he became angry. Said things about me that weren't true, then drew his pistol when I tried to walk away." The sheriff sighed, the weight of frontier justice heavy on his shoulders. "Blackwell, hand over your gun. You're spending the night in my jail while I sort this out." "This is horseshit," Blackwell growled, but relented when the sheriff's deputy appeared, shotgun in hand. As the lawman led Blackwell away, the crowd began to disperse, their entertainment concluded for the day. Lily swayed slightly, the shock and blood loss taking their toll. Gabriel was beside her in an instant, offering his arm for support. "Madam, you need a doctor," he said, his voice gentler than it had been moments before. "Thank you," she whispered. "Most men wouldn't have done what you did." Gabriel's expression remained stoic, but his eyes softened. "Most men aren't worth the powder to blow them to hell. Let's get you patched up." Dr. Wilson's office was only a short walk away, but to Lily, each step felt like a mile. The cowboy beside her moved with calm assurance, his presence somehow steadying despite being a complete stranger. "I don't even know your name," Lily said as they reached the doctor's porch. "Gabriel James," he replied with a slight tip of his hat. "Just passing through, Lily O'Malley. I teach at the schoolhouse." Something flickered across Gabriel's face, surprise, perhaps, or recognition of a kindred spirit. Whatever it was vanished as quickly as it had appeared. When Dr. Wilson opened the door, concern etched on his face at the sight of Lily's bloodied arm. "Good Lord, child, what happened?" the elderly doctor exclaimed, ushering her inside. Gabriel hesitated at the threshold. "A misunderstanding," Lily replied, glancing back at Gabriel. "This gentleman intervened on my behalf." Dr. Wilson nodded approvingly at Gabriel. "Well done, young man. Come in, I'll need help with her." The doctor's office was small but meticulously clean. Gabriel removed his hat as he entered, revealing a mane of dark hair streaked with premature silver at the temples. He stood awkwardly to one side as Dr. Wilson helped Lily onto an examination table and began cutting away the sleeve of her dress. "It's a clean wound," the doctor announced after careful inspection. "Bullet grazed you good but didn't stay for a visit. You're lucky, Miss O'Malley." "Luck had nothing to do with it," Lily replied, wincing as the doctor cleaned the wound. "If not for Mr. James, I fear Mr. Blackwell would have aimed more carefully with his second shot." Gabriel shifted uncomfortably under her grateful gaze. "Anyone would have done the same." "We both know that's not true," she said quietly, "Doctor." Wilson worked efficiently, cleaning and bandaging Lily's arm. "You'll need to keep this clean and change the dressing daily. Come see me in a week, sooner if there's any sign of infection." Gabriel pulled out his wallet. "How much do we owe you, Doc?" "Put that away." Dr. Wilson waved him off. "I don't charge for treating victims of violence. This town has enough troubles without adding medical debt to them." Outside, the late afternoon sun cast long shadows down the street. Lily hesitated on the doctor's porch, suddenly aware of how alone she was. Her small house on the edge of town seemed impossibly far away. "I should escort you home," Gabriel said, reading her thoughts. "Blackwell might have friends." "You've already done more than enough," Lily protested, though the thought of walking home alone made her stomach clench with anxiety. "I've got nowhere pressing to be," Gabriel replied. Something in his tone suggested this wasn't entirely true, but Lily was too grateful to question it. They walked in companionable silence, Lily leading the way through the town's dusty streets. Children played in yards, women hung laundry, and men lounged on porches smoking pipes, all normal activities that now seemed surreal after the violence of the day. "You said you're just passing through," Lily ventured as they reached the outskirts where modest homes gave way to scattered homesteads. "Where are you headed?" Gabriel adjusted his hat. "California, maybe. Heard there's good work for experienced hands on the big ranches out there." "You're a long way from Texas," Lily observed, noting the distinctive style of his worn boots and saddle. A ghost of a smile touched his lips. "Not much gets past a schoolteacher, does it? Observation is a necessary skill when managing 30 children of varying ages and temperaments," she replied with a small smile of her own. "Besides, your accent gives you away." They reached a small white clapboard house with a neat garden out front. A cluster of wildflowers grew beside the path, their colors vibrant against the dusty landscape. "This is me," Lily said, stopping at the gate. She turned to face Gabriel fully. "I don't know how to thank you properly, Mr. James." "Gabriel," he corrected. "And you don't need to thank me. What Blackwell did wasn't right." "Nevertheless, I'm grateful." Lily hesitated, then continued. Would you like to stay for supper? It's the least I can offer." Gabriel glanced at the setting sun, then back at Lily. Propriety dictated he should decline, but something in her eyes, a mixture of gratitude, loneliness, and genuine kindness, made the decision for him. "I'd be honored, Miss O'Malley." "Lily," she corrected with a smile. "If we're to be friends, we should use our given names." "Friends," Gabriel repeated, as if testing the word. "It's been a while since I could claim any of those." Inside, Lily's home was modest but comfortable. Books lined shelves along one wall, unusual for a frontier home, and a small upright piano stood in one corner. Gabriel removed his hat and gun belt, hanging them by the door as Lily busied herself at the stove. "Can I help?" he asked, feeling out of place among the feminine touches of lace curtains and embroidered pillows. "You can set the table," Lily suggested, gesturing to a cabinet where plates were stored. "I'm afraid it's just beans and biscuits. I wasn't expecting company." "Beans and biscuits sounds like a feast to a man who's been eating his own cooking on the trail," Gabriel assured her. As they prepared the simple meal together, Lily found herself studying her unexpected guest. His movements were efficient and deliberate, his manner reserved but not unfriendly. There was something in the way he carried himself that spoke of burdens and battles fought long before he stepped between her and Blackwell's bullet. "Have you been teaching long?" Gabriel asked as they sat down to eat. "3 years," Lily replied. "I came west after my parents passed." There weren't many opportunities for unmarried women back in Ohio, but out here, towns are desperate for teachers. Gabriel nodded. "Must take courage to travel so far alone, or desperation," Lily said with a wry smile. "What about you? Have you always been a cowboy?" A shadow crossed Gabriel's face. "Since the war ended. Before that, I studied law in Austin, had plans to join my father's practice." "The war changed things for many people," Lily said softly, not pressing when Gabriel didn't elaborate. They ate in comfortable silence for a while, the ticking of Lily's small clock and the occasional clink of silverware the only sounds. Outside, the sky deepened to purple, stars beginning to appear. "What will you do about Blackwell?" Gabriel finally asked, the question that had been hanging between them. Lily sighed. "I don't know. The sheriff will likely release him tomorrow. Men like Thomas Blackwell rarely face consequences for their actions, especially when it's just my word against his. You have witnesses, you have me." "And how long will you be in Sweetwater Springs?" Lily asked, meeting his gaze directly. Gabriel looked down at his empty plate. "I had planned to leave at first light." "Exactly," Lily said without bitterness. "Life continues. You have your path, I have mine. Perhaps the incident will blow over." "And if it doesn't?" Gabriel's voice had an edge to it now. "Then I'll handle it as I've handled everything else since coming west," Lily replied with quiet dignity. One day at a time. Gabriel studied her, seeing beyond the schoolteacher's proper exterior to the steel beneath. "You're a remarkable woman, Lily O'Malley." A blush colored her cheeks. "Hardly, just practical." After supper, they washed the dishes together, falling into an easy rhythm that belied their brief acquaintance. Gabriel found himself reluctant to leave, a feeling he hadn't experienced in years of drifting. "I should go," he finally said, retrieving his hat and gun belt from their hook. "You need rest, and I've imposed long enough." Lily walked him to the door. "Where are you staying?" "Got a room at the boarding house in town," Gabriel replied. "Mrs. Simmons seems to run a tight ship." "The tightest," Lily agreed with a small laugh. "Mind you're not a minute late for breakfast, or she'll give your portion to her cats." They stood awkwardly at the threshold, neither quite ready to say goodbye. Gabriel cleared his throat. "I'll check on you tomorrow before I ride out," he said. "Make sure you're healing properly." "I'd like that," Lily replied softly. Gabriel hesitated, then placed his hat on his head with a slight nod. "Good night, Lily." "Good night, Gabriel, and thank you again." She watched from the doorway as he walked down the path and disappeared into the darkness, his tall figure soon swallowed by the night. Only when she could no longer hear the jingle of his spurs did she close the door, pressing her back against it, as she released a breath she hadn't realized she was holding. For the first time since the shooting, Lily allowed herself to tremble, the day's events washing over her in a wave of delayed shock. She sank to the floor, hugging her knees to her chest, tears streaming down her face. It wasn't just the violence or the public humiliation that had shaken her. It was the unexpected kindness from a stranger when everyone else had stood by in judgment. Gabriel James had no reason to help her, no stake in her reputation or welfare, yet he had risked everything for her. She didn't know what tomorrow would bring, but tonight she wasn't alone. Gabriel walked slowly back to town, his spurs leaving tiny crescents in the dusty road. The stars overhead were brilliant in the clear desert sky, but his thoughts were too turbulent to appreciate their beauty. He hadn't planned to get involved in local troubles. After 15 years of drifting, he'd learned that a man stayed healthiest by minding his own business. Yet the moment he'd seen Lily O'Malley standing alone in that street, blood seeping through her sleeve and her chin held high despite the fear in her eyes, something long dormant had stirred in his chest. Mrs. Simmons was locking up when he reached the boarding house, her plump face creased with disapproval at his late return. "Heard about your excitement today, Mr. James," she said, holding the door open just wide enough for him to slip through. Not everyone in town thinks highly of your interference. Not surprised, Gabriel replied evenly. Truth often makes folks uncomfortable, the landlady sniffed. Miss O'Malley is a good teacher, but a woman alone invites talk. She'd do better to find herself a husband and settle down properly. Maybe the talk should stop and the thinking should start, Gabriel suggested, tipping his hat before heading upstairs to his room. He lay awake long into the night, staring at the ceiling as he wrestled with a decision he'd already half made. The smart thing would be to ride out at dawn as planned, continue west toward California and the promise of anonymous work. Staying meant complications, potential danger, and reopening wounds he'd spent years trying to cauterize with distance and movement. Yet every time he closed his eyes, he saw Lily O'Malley's face, not afraid as she'd been in the street, but as she'd looked at her kitchen table, speaking of handling things one day at a time with quiet dignity and unexpected humor. When dawn broke, Gabriel rose and packed his few belongings. He paid his bill, thanked Mrs. Simmons for her hospitality, and headed to the livery stable where his horse waited. The morning was cool, the town just beginning to stir as he saddled his mount, a sturdy bay gelding that had carried him faithfully for 3 years. Ready for California, old friend, he murmured, patting the horse's neck. The animal nickered softly in response, sensing his rider's indecision. Gabriel led the horse out into the street, pausing to look in the direction of the sheriff's office. Making a sudden decision, he tied the bay to a hitching post and strode toward the jailhouse, his face set with determination. Sheriff Miller was at his desk, nursing a cup of coffee and looking as if he'd had a long night. He glanced up as Gabriel entered, recognition dawning slowly. "Mr. James," he acknowledged, "figured you'd be long gone by now." "Had some unfinished business," Gabriel replied, glancing toward the cells in the back. "Blackwell's still here," the sheriff nodded, letting him sleep off the whiskey before releasing him. "Man made quite a racket last night, threatening all sorts of vengeance. Against Miss O'Malley," Miller's expression grew serious. "Among others, you featured prominently in his plans." Gabriel nodded, unsurprised. "That's why I'm here. I want to file a formal complaint against Blackwell for assault with a deadly weapon." The sheriff raised an eyebrow. "Thought you were just passing through." "Plans change," Gabriel replied simply. Miller studied him for a long moment, then pulled out a form from his desk. "All right. This will mean a trial. Judge Wilson won't be through for another 2 weeks. You prepared to stay that long?" "If that's what it takes," Gabriel confirmed, taking the offered pen. As he filled out the complaint, detailing what he had witnessed in the street, Gabriel felt a strange sense of purpose settling over him. For years he had drifted, carrying the weight of his past without direction or anchor. Now, in this dusty frontier town, defending a schoolteacher he barely knew, he felt something he hadn't experienced since before the war: conviction. When he finished, Sheriff Miller read over the form and nodded. "This should hold him for now. I'll need Miss O'Malley to file her own statement." "I'll let her know," Gabriel said, standing to leave. "James," the sheriff called as Gabriel reached the door. "Blackwell's got friends in this town, powerful ones. You sure you want this fight?" Gabriel paused, his hand on the doorknob. "Some fights choose you, Sheriff. Besides, seems to me this town could use a few more people willing to stand up for what's right." Outside, the sun had fully risen, bathing Sweetwater Springs in golden light. Gabriel untied his horse and led him down the street, past the mercantile and the saloon, toward the edge of town where a small white house waited. He found Lily in her garden, her injured arm in a sling, awkwardly trying to water her flowers with her good hand. She looked up at the sound of approaching hoofbeats, surprise and pleasure brightening her face when she recognized him. "Gabriel, I thought you'd be halfway to the territorial border by now." He dismounted, tying his horse to her fence post. "Change of plans, need your help with something." Lily set down her watering can, curiosity evident in her expression. "Of course. What is it?" "Filed a formal complaint against Blackwell," Gabriel explained, stepping through the gate. "Sheriff needs your statement too if we're going to keep him locked up until the judge arrives." "We." Lily repeated, her eyes widening. Gabriel shifted uncomfortably under her gaze. "Figured I'd stick around until the trial, make sure things are handled properly. A slow smile spread across Lily's face, transforming her features with unexpected warmth. What about California? California's been there a long time, Gabriel replied with a shrug. Reckon it'll still be there in a few weeks. Lily studied him for a long moment, as if seeing beyond his casual demeanor to the decision it masked. Finally, she nodded. I'll get my shawl. The walk to the sheriff's office was considerably different from their tense journey the previous evening. The morning was bright, townspeople nodded greetings as they passed, and Lily walked with renewed confidence, her head high despite the whispers that followed them. People are talking, she observed quietly. Let them, Gabriel replied. Talk is just air moving around. Actions matter more. Lily smiled at his pragmatic philosophy. And your action is to delay your journey for a woman you just met. Why? Gabriel considered the question carefully. When I was young, my father taught me that a man's character is defined by what he does when it would be easier to do nothing. During the war, I forgot that for a while. Maybe I'm trying to remember. Lily didn't press for details, sensing the pain behind his words. Instead, she touched his arm lightly. Well, I'm grateful, whatever your reasons. At the sheriff's office, Lily provided her statement with calm clarity, describing Blackwell's harassment, his threats, and finally the shot that had grazed her arm. Sheriff Miller took down every word, his expression growing grimmer by the minute. This isn't Blackwell's first offense, he admitted when she finished. But usually the women don't press charges, too scared or they leave town. I'm not leaving, Lily said firmly. This is my home now. The sheriff nodded approvingly. Between your statement and Mr. James's testimony, we should be able to hold Blackwell until Judge Wilson arrives. After that, it's up to the court. As they left the jailhouse, Gabriel noticed Lily's pale face and the slight tremble in her hands. You did well in there, he said gently. I'm terrified, she admitted, but also relieved. For years I've taught my students about standing up for what's right. It would be hypocritical to do any less myself. Gabriel smiled, a genuine expression that transformed his usually serious face. You're not what I expected to find in Sweetwater Springs, Lily O'Malley. And what did you expect? She asked, curious. Honestly, I didn't expect to find anything worth staying for. The words hung between them, weighted with meaning neither was quite ready to examine. Lily broke the moment with a practical question. Where will you stay? Mrs. Simmons doesn't usually keep boarders for extended periods. Gabriel hadn't considered this. Hadn't thought that far ahead. Maybe the hotel? Lily shook her head. The hotel's expensive, and it's owned by Mr. Riker, who's close with Blackwell. You'd likely find your welcome wearing thin quickly. She hesitated, then continued. I have a small cabin behind my house. It's nothing fancy, just one room with a stove and bed, but it was there when I bought the property. Previous owner used it as a workshop. It's yours if you want it, at least until the trial. Gabriel was taken aback by the offer. That's mighty generous, but what about your reputation? You've had enough trouble without adding a man living on your property to the gossip. Lily laughed, the sound surprisingly carefree given their circumstances. Gabriel, I've been shot at in the main street and am pressing charges against one of the town's wealthiest men. I think my reputation can survive offering shelter to the man who saved my life. Put that way, it was hard to argue. All right then, I accept with gratitude. I'll pay rent, of course. We can discuss terms later, Lily said with a smile. First, let's get your horse settled. The cabin was exactly as Lily had described, small but sturdy, with a cast iron stove, a narrow bed, a table with 2 chairs, and shelves along one wall. Gabriel's few possessions barely made a dent in the space, but he immediately felt more at home than he had in any of the countless rooms he'd rented over the years of drifting. It gets good light in the morning, Lily explained, opening the single window. And there's a pump out back that draws clean water. You're welcome to take meals with me if you like, though I understand if you prefer your privacy. Gabriel set his saddlebags on the bed. I'm not much of a talker, but I enjoy your company. And I'm handy with repairs if you've got anything needs fixing around the property. Actually, Lily said, brightening, the schoolhouse roof has a leak that's been driving me to distraction. The town council keeps promising to fix it, but… Consider it done, Gabriel replied, pleased to have a way to repay her kindness. That evening, after a simple supper during which Gabriel told stories of cattle drives that had Lily laughing until tears came to her eyes, they sat on her small porch watching fireflies dance in the gathering dusk. "Will you tell me about the war?" Lily asked softly, breaking a comfortable silence. Gabriel stiffened slightly, his face hardening into the mask he'd worn when they first met. "Not much to tell that's fit for evening conversation." "I understand," Lily said, not pressing. "My brother fought too." "He came back. Different is one way to put it," Gabriel acknowledged. "Where did he serve?" "With Sherman through Georgia and the Carolinas," Lily replied. "He doesn't talk about it either, but sometimes he wakes screaming." Gabriel nodded, familiar with such nightmares. "And where is he now?" "Oregon. He couldn't settle after the war, kept moving west. Last letter said he'd found work as a logger." There was a wistfulness in her voice that spoke of missing family, of connections stretched thin by distance. "You could have gone with him," Gabriel observed. Lily shook her head. "He needed space to heal, and I needed to make my own way. We write, but it's not the same." They fell silent again, the rhythmic chirping of crickets filling the night air. Gabriel found himself studying Lily's profile in the fading light, the gentle curve of her cheek, the determined set of her jaw, the wisp of hair that had escaped her simple bun. "It was Shiloh," he said suddenly, the words emerging unbidden. "I was 19, studying law, full of grand ideas about honor and duty. Enlisted with a bunch of other students from the university. Thought we'd have a grand adventure, be home by Christmas." Lily remained silent, giving him space to continue or stop as he needed. Shiloh changed everything. The noise, the smoke, men falling everywhere, nothing in books prepares you for that reality. Gabriel's voice was distant, his eyes focused on something only he could see. "After, I couldn't go back to books and courtrooms, couldn't sit still, so I started moving and never really stopped." "Until now," Lily observed quietly. Gabriel turned to look at her fully. "Until now," he agreed. The 2 weeks leading up to Judge Wilson's arrival settled into an unexpected routine. Gabriel repaired the schoolhouse roof, watching with amusement as Lily taught her students with a blend of firmness and kindness that coaxed learning from even the most reluctant children. In the evenings, they shared meals and conversation that grew increasingly comfortable and wide-ranging. News of Blackwell's continued imprisonment spread through town, along with the reason for it. Opinion was divided. Some applauded Lily's courage, while others muttered that she was causing unnecessary trouble. Several of Blackwell's friends made a point of removing their children from Lily's classroom, but for every family that left, another seemed to take their place. "People respect backbone," Sheriff Miller explained when Gabriel commented on the phenomenon, "even if they don't admit it." The night before the judge was due to arrive, Gabriel returned to the cabin to find a letter had been slipped under his door. The note was brief and unsigned. "Drop the charges if you want the schoolteacher to keep breathing." Cold anger washed through him as he crumpled the paper in his fist. He had expected something like this, had been watching for signs of trouble, but the direct threat to Lily still hit him with unexpected force. He was halfway to her house when he stopped, forcing himself to think rationally. Showing her the note would only frighten her, and she had shown remarkable courage thus far. Instead, he changed direction and headed to the sheriff's office. Miller read the note with a grim expression. "Figured something like this might happen. Blackwell's been too quiet lately." "I'll be staying close to Miss O'Malley until this is resolved," Gabriel said, his tone making it clear this wasn't open for discussion. The sheriff nodded. "I'll have my deputy keep an eye on the school during the day. Between us, we'll make sure nothing happens to her." Walking back to Lily's property, Gabriel felt the weight of his gun at his hip and found it reassuring for the first time in years. He had spent so long running from violence, trying to forget the man he'd become during the war. Now, he found himself embracing those hard-earned skills in service of someone worth protecting. Lily was on her porch when he returned, a book open in her lap, though her gaze was directed at the sunset, painting the western sky in shades of gold and crimson. "Beautiful evening," Gabriel commented, settling into the chair beside her. She agreed. "Though there's a storm coming, you can smell it in the air." Gabriel glanced at the clear sky. You have weather sense, just observation, Lily replied with a smile. The birds have been restless all day, and the wind changed direction an hour ago. By morning, we'll have rain. Gabriel marveled at her attunement to the natural world. For all her books and education, Lily O'Malley was as much a creature of this frontier as any native-born Westerner. Judge arrives tomorrow, he reminded her unnecessarily. Lily's smile faded, her expression growing serious. Yes, are you nervous? About testifying? No. About what might happen after? Maybe. Gabriel hesitated, then added, there are people in town who don't want Blackwell convicted. I know, Lily said quietly. Mrs. Peterson withdrew her 3 children today, said she didn't want them taught by a woman who makes trouble. I'm sorry, Gabriel said, reaching over to cover her hand with his own. This hasn't been easy for you. Lily turned her hand to clasp his. Few worthwhile things are. Besides, I'm not alone in this fight. The simple touch of her hand in his sent warmth spreading through Gabriel's chest, a sensation both foreign and achingly familiar. He couldn't remember the last time he'd allowed himself to care this deeply about another person's welfare, let alone about their touch. No, he agreed, his voice rougher than usual. You're not alone. They sat hand in hand as darkness fell, neither speaking, both aware that something fundamental had shifted between them. When Lily finally rose to go inside, she paused at her door. Whatever happens tomorrow, Gabriel, I want you to know I'm glad you stayed. Before he could respond, she was gone, the door closing softly behind her. Gabriel remained on the porch for a long time afterward, listening to the night sounds and wondering at the strange turn his life had taken. True to Lily's prediction, rain began falling shortly before dawn, a steady downpour that turned Sweetwater Springs' dusty streets to mud and cast a gray pall over the day of the trial. Gabriel insisted on escorting Lily to the schoolhouse, where her students waited despite the weather. I'll come for you when it's time, he promised, reluctant to leave her even in the familiar confines of her classroom. I'll be fine, she assured him. Deputy Collins is right outside, and I have 30 children as witnesses should anything happen. Gabriel smiled at her attempt at humor. Still, don't leave with anyone but me or the sheriff, no matter what they say. Lily nodded, suddenly serious. I promise. The courthouse was packed by mid-afternoon when the trial began. Judge Wilson, a stern-faced man with piercing blue eyes and a reputation for fairness, listened carefully as Sheriff Miller outlined the charges against Thomas Blackwell. Blackwell himself sat with his lawyer, a slick-looking man named Harrington who had traveled from Tucson specifically for the case. The accused glared openly at Gabriel, who sat stoically in the front row, his face betraying nothing of the vigilance with which he watched everyone in the room. Lily arrived escorted by Deputy Collins, her simple gray dress and neat appearance projecting respectability and calm despite the whispers that followed her to her seat beside Gabriel. You ready? He murmured as she settled beside him. As I'll ever be, she replied, her hands clasped tightly in her lap. The trial proceeded methodically. Sheriff Miller testified about the scene he'd encountered and the evidence he'd gathered. Several townspeople described what they'd witnessed, though Gabriel noted that their accounts seemed carefully worded to avoid direct accusation against Blackwell. When Gabriel's turn came, he spoke clearly and directly, describing exactly what he had seen and heard. Harrington attempted to undermine his testimony by emphasizing his drifter status and short time in town, but Gabriel's steady responses and unwavering gaze seemed to impress the judge. Finally, it was Lily's turn. She walked to the witness stand with her head high, took the oath with a clear voice, and began her account of the events leading to the shooting. Mr. Blackwell approached me at the town social, she explained. He made advances that I declined politely. He became insistent, suggesting that a woman alone in the West must be open to arrangements. And how did you respond? Judge Wilson prompted. I told him I was not interested in any arrangement, proper or otherwise, Lily continued. He seemed to accept this, but the next day he confronted me outside the mercantile, claiming I had led him on. When I again refused his attentions and attempted to leave, he called me, names no lady should hear, then drew his pistol and fired. Harrington rose for cross-examination, his expression coldly calculating. "Miss O'Malley, how long have you lived in Sweetwater Springs?" 3 years this September, Lily replied. "And in that time, have you ever accepted the courtship of any local man?" Lily frowned. "I have had gentlemen callers, yes, none that progressed to formal courtship." "Many gentlemen callers," Harrington pressed. "Objection," Sheriff Miller interrupted, functioning as prosecutor in the absence of a district attorney. "The lady's social life is not on trial here." "I'm establishing character, Your Honor," Harrington argued. Judge Wilson considered, then nodded. "I'll allow it, but tread carefully, Counselor." Harrington turned back to Lily. "How many men have called on you, Miss O'Malley?" "I haven't kept count," Lily replied evenly. "Perhaps half a dozen over the years." "And you rejected them all." "I found we weren't compatible," Lily said, a hint of steel entering her voice. "Isn't it true, Miss O'Malley, that you enjoy the attention of men, that you encourage their interest, then reject them when they respond? That you, in fact, asked for Mr. Blackwell's attention at the social by engaging him in conversation, standing close to him, perhaps even touching his arm?" Gabriel's hands clenched into fists, but Lily's voice remained calm. "No, sir, that is not true. I was polite to Mr. Blackwell as I am to all my neighbors. I did not encourage his advances, and I certainly did not ask to be shot in the street for declining them." A murmur ran through the courtroom at her direct response. Harrington tried another tack. "Miss O'Malley, isn't it true that you have been seen frequently in the company of Mr. James since the alleged incident? That he has, in fact, taken up residence on your property?" "Mr. James has rented the cabin behind my house while awaiting this trial," Lily confirmed, refusing to be baited into defensiveness. "He is a witness in this case and has been concerned for my safety, concerned enough to spend many evenings alone with you, to accompany you to and from the schoolhouse each day. Some might call such behavior inappropriate for an unmarried woman." Before Lily could respond, Judge Wilson interrupted. "Mr. Harrington, you're badgering the witness and straying from the matter at hand. The lady's current living arrangements have no bearing on whether your client shot her 3 weeks ago." Harrington bowed slightly. "Of course, Your Honor. No further questions." As Lily returned to her seat, Gabriel could see the tension in her shoulders despite her composed expression. He resisted the urge to take her hand, aware that every eye in the courtroom was watching them. Blackwell himself testified last, claiming that Lily had invited his attentions, then became hysterical when he suggested they meet privately. He admitted drawing his weapon, but insisted it had discharged accidentally during a struggle. "So you admit firing the shot that injured Miss O'Malley?" Judge Wilson clarified. Blackwell nodded reluctantly. "It was an accident, Your Honor. I never meant to hurt her." "Yet you publicly claimed she asked for it immediately after shooting her," the judge observed, referencing earlier testimony. "I was upset," Blackwell muttered, "wasn't thinking clearly." Judge Wilson called a brief recess to consider his verdict. As the courtroom emptied, Gabriel and Lily remained seated, both aware of the hostile glances directed their way by Blackwell's supporters. "You did well up there," Gabriel said quietly. "He made me sound like." Lily trailed off, unable to voice the implication. "Anyone who knows you knows that's not true," Gabriel assured her. And Judge Wilson seems to see through Harrington's tactics. When court reconvened 30 minutes later, Judge Wilson delivered his verdict with measured words. "This court finds Thomas Blackwell guilty of assault with a deadly weapon. Given the public nature of the attack and Mr. Blackwell's own admission to firing the shot, I sentence him to 1 year in the territorial prison." A collective gasp went through the courtroom, followed by angry mutters from Blackwell's supporters. The man himself turned purple with rage. "This is an outrage," he shouted. "All because some schoolmarm can't take a joke." "Mr. Blackwell," Judge Wilson said sharply, "your attitude only confirms the correctness of my verdict. Sheriff, remove the prisoner." As Miller and his deputy led Blackwell away, the convicted man twisted to glare at Gabriel and Lily. "This isn't over," he snarled. "Not by a long shot." Gabriel moved instinctively closer to Lily, his hand hovering near his gun. But Blackwell was already being dragged from the courtroom, his threats fading as the door closed behind him. The crowd dispersed slowly, some offering congratulations to Lily while others turned away in disapproval. Gabriel remained vigilant, watching for any sign of trouble from Blackwell's friends. Outside, the rain had stopped, leaving puddles reflecting the late afternoon sun. Gabriel and Lily walked slowly toward her house, both processing the day's events. "It's really over," Lily said wonderingly. "I half expected him to be acquitted." "Justice prevailed for once," Gabriel agreed, though he remained alert, scanning the street as they walked. "Will you be leaving now?" Lily asked, the question she'd been holding back since the verdict. Gabriel looked down at her, seeing the vulnerability beneath her composed exterior. "Not right away," he said carefully. "Blackwell's threats weren't idle. He has friends who might try to carry them out." "So you're staying to protect me," Lily clarified, a hint of disappointment in her voice. Gabriel stopped walking, turning to face her fully. "That's part of it," he admitted, "but only part. What's the rest?" Lily asked, her eyes searching his face. Gabriel struggled to find words for feelings he'd denied for so long. "I've been running since the war," he said finally. "Moving from place to place, never settling, never connecting, but here with you. I found something I didn't know I was looking for." Lily's eyes widened, hope blooming in their depths. "And what is that?" "Peace," Gabriel said simply. "A reason to stop running." Before she could respond, a shot cracked through the air, and Gabriel instinctively pushed Lily down, covering her body with his own as they fell into the muddy street. More shots followed in quick succession, splintering the wood of a nearby hitching post. "Are you hit?" Gabriel demanded, already drawing his gun and searching for the shooter. "No," Lily gasped, mud soaking into her dress. "Where?" "Upper window, mercantile," Gabriel said tersely, spotting the rifle barrel protruding from the second-floor window. "Stay down." He fired twice in rapid succession, not aiming to hit the shooter but to force them back from the window. Shouts erupted as townspeople scattered for cover, and moments later Sheriff Miller appeared, shotgun in hand. "James, what's happening?" "Sniper in the mercantile," Gabriel called back, keeping his body between Lily and the building. "Took shots at us." Miller nodded grimly. "Get Miss O'Malley to safety, I'll handle this." Gabriel helped Lily to her feet, keeping low as they hurried toward the nearest building, the doctor's office. Once inside, he positioned her away from windows, his gun still drawn. "You're bleeding," Lily exclaimed, pointing to his arm where a dark stain was spreading across his sleeve. Gabriel glanced down, only now feeling the burn of the bullet's graze. "It's nothing, just a scratch, doctor." Wilson hurried in from the back room, alarmed by their sudden entrance. "What in heaven's name?" "Someone's shooting at us from the mercantile," Gabriel explained tersely. "Sheriff's handling it. Doc, can you stay with Miss O'Malley? I need to help Miller." Gabriel, "No." Lily protested, grabbing his uninjured arm. "You're hurt, and they're trying to kill you." "All the more reason to end this now," Gabriel replied, his expression hardening into the look of a man who had faced death before and wasn't afraid to do so again. Lily saw the determination in his eyes and knew she couldn't stop him. "Be careful," she whispered, releasing his arm. Gabriel nodded, then slipped out the back door of the doctor's office, circling around to approach the mercantile from behind. The streets were eerily empty, townspeople having taken cover at the first sound of gunfire. He could hear Miller shouting for the shooter to surrender, but no response came. Moving with the stealth learned during the war, Gabriel made his way to the rear entrance of the mercantile. The door was locked, but a well-placed kick splintered the frame, allowing him entry. Inside, the store was dark and quiet, goods neatly arranged on shelves and counters. Gabriel moved carefully toward the stairs, his gun ready, ears straining for any sound from above. A floorboard creaked overhead, followed by the metallic click of a rifle being reloaded. Taking the stairs two at a time, Gabriel burst into the upper room to find a man he recognized as one of Blackwell's drinking companions swinging the rifle toward him. Gabriel fired first, the bullet striking the man's shoulder and sending him crashing backward against the wall. The rifle clattered to the floor as the would-be assassin clutched his wound, cursing. Gabriel kept his gun trained on the man as Sheriff Miller thundered up the stairs behind him. "Frank Peterson," Miller said with disgust, recognizing the shooter. "Should have known Blackwell would send you to do his dirty work." Blackwell's gonna be real disappointed when he hears you failed, Gabriel added coldly. Peterson glared at them both, blood seeping between his fingers. The school teachers caused enough trouble, he spat. Town was peaceful before she started getting ideas above her station. The town was ignoring injustice, Gabriel countered. And now you can join Blackwell in the territorial prison for attempted murder. As Miller handcuffed the wounded man and led him away, Gabriel felt the adrenaline draining from his system, leaving him suddenly aware of the throbbing pain in his arm. He made his way back to the doctor's office, where he found Lily pacing anxiously, her mudded dress forgotten in her worry. "Gabriel," she cried when he entered, rushing to his side. "Are you all right? I heard more shots." "It's over," he assured her, allowing Dr. Wilson to help him to an examination table. Frank Peterson was the shooter. Sheriff's got him in custody." "Mrs. Peterson's husband," Lily murmured, connecting the name to the woman who had withdrawn her children from school. "I never thought he'd go this far. Men do desperate things when their pride is wounded," Dr. Wilson commented, cutting away Gabriel's sleeve to examine the bullet graze. And Blackwell's pride was mighty damaged by that verdict today. Gabriel winced as the doctor cleaned the wound. Peterson mentioned Blackwell, must have arranged this before being transported to prison. Lily's face paled. "Then it's not over." "There could be others, it's over," Gabriel interrupted firmly. "Peterson will talk to save his own skin, and the sheriff will round up anyone else involved. Blackwell's influence is finished in this town." Dr. Wilson wrapped Gabriel's arm in clean bandages. "Keep this dry for a few days. You're lucky another inch to the right and we'd be digging a bullet out of you." "Wouldn't be the first time," Gabriel replied with grim humor. When they finally left the doctor's office, the sun was setting, casting long shadows down the muddy street. Sheriff Miller met them outside. "Peterson's singing like a canary," he reported. "Says Blackwell paid him and 2 others to teach you both a lesson. I've got deputies bringing in the other 2 now." "Thank you, Sheriff," Lily said gratefully, "for everything." Miller tipped his hat. "Just doing my job, Miss O'Malley. Though I reckon I should be thanking Mr. James here for his quick thinking." "Walk you home?" Gabriel asked Lily when the sheriff had gone. She nodded, suddenly exhausted by the day's events. They walked in silence through the quiet streets, both aware of curious eyes watching from windows and doorways. News of the shooting and Peterson's arrest had clearly spread through town already. At Lily's gate, they paused. Her dress was ruined with mud, her hair had come loose from its pins, and she had never looked more beautiful to Gabriel than in that moment of disheveled courage. "Would you like to come in for supper?" she asked, the familiar question carrying new weight after the day's revelations. Gabriel nodded. "I'd like that very much." Inside, Lily changed into a clean dress while Gabriel built a fire in the stove. The simple domestic actions felt like anchors after the chaos of the day, grounding them both in normalcy. As they prepared a simple meal together, Gabriel found himself watching Lily, the graceful movement of her hands, the determined set of her jaw, the occasional smile that transformed her face. He had spent so many years guarding himself against attachment, convinced that caring too deeply would only lead to more pain. Now, he found himself willingly, eagerly lowering those defenses. Over supper, they talked of practical matters, the repairs the schoolhouse still needed, whether Gabriel's arm would heal quickly, what the town's reaction might be to the day's events. It was only when they had cleared the dishes that Lily returned to their interrupted conversation from before the shooting. "You said you found peace here," she reminded him, her voice soft in the lamp-lit kitchen. "With me," Gabriel nodded, suddenly finding it difficult to meet her eyes. "I have." "What does that mean for your plans? For California?" Gabriel took a deep breath, gathering courage for a different kind of risk than he'd faced earlier that day. "I'm thinking maybe California can wait, if there's a reason to stay here." "Is there?" Lily asked, her heart in her eyes. "I think there is," Gabriel said, reaching across the table to take her hand. "If you want me to stay." Lily's fingers tightened around his. "I do, very much." "I don't have much to offer," Gabriel warned. "Just myself, my work, my word." "That's everything that matters," Lily replied simply. Gabriel stood, drawing her up with him, their joined hands a bridge between them. Lily O'Malley, I've spent 15 years running from myself and everything else. I don't want to run anymore. I want to stay here with you if you'll have me. Lily stepped closer, her free hand rising to touch his face. I'll have you, Gabriel James, on one condition. Name it, he said, his voice rough with emotion. That you kiss me now before anything else happens to interrupt us again. Gabriel smiled, the expression transforming his weathered face. Yes, madam, he murmured, bending to press his lips to hers. The kiss was gentle at first, a question being asked and answered, then deepened as years of loneliness and wandering gave way to the promise of home and belonging. When they finally broke apart, both breathing heavily, Gabriel rested his forehead against hers. I should have done that weeks ago, he admitted. Better late than never, Lily replied with a smile that outshone the lamp's glow. In the months that followed, Sweetwater Springs witnessed a transformation. Gabriel James, the drifting cowboy who had stepped between a schoolteacher and a bullet, became the town's most respected blacksmith, turning his skilled hands to creating rather than destroying. The small cabin behind Lily's house was expanded into a proper smithy, where Gabriel crafted everything from horseshoes to intricate iron gates that were soon in demand throughout the territory. Lily continued teaching, her classroom fuller than ever as parents recognized the value of education provided by a woman of principle. The whispers that had followed her after the shooting gradually changed in tone from scandal to admiration, especially when Judge Wilson commended her courage in a public letter to the territorial newspaper. Thomas Blackwell served his year in prison and never returned to Sweetwater Springs, choosing instead to seek his fortunes farther west. Frank Peterson received a similar sentence, his accomplices slightly less for turning state's evidence. Mrs. Peterson eventually apologized to Lily and returned her children to the schoolhouse, admitting that her husband had been wrong. 6 months after the trial, on a clear autumn day with the desert blooming in unexpected colors after rare rains, Gabriel and Lily were married in the small church on the edge of town. Sheriff Miller stood as Gabriel's best man, while Lily's students scattered wildflower petals along the aisle. Their vows were simple but profound, promises made by two people who had found in each other the courage to stand against injustice and the comfort of unconditional acceptance. When Gabriel repeated the traditional words to love, honor, and cherish, those who knew their story heard the deeper meaning beneath the familiar phrase. After the ceremony, the entire town gathered for a celebration that lasted well into the night. Even those who had once sided with Blackwell came to offer congratulations, a testament to the community's healing and the couple's forgiveness. Later, as they walked hand in hand toward their home, no longer just Lily's house, but truly theirs, Gabriel paused to look up at the star-filled desert sky. "What are you thinking?" Lily asked, leaning against his shoulder. "That some trails take longer than others," Gabriel replied, "but if they lead to the right place, every step is worthwhile." Lily smiled, understanding. "And this is the right place." Gabriel looked down at his wife, still amazed by the journey that had brought him to her side. "This is exactly where I'm meant to be." 5 years later, Gabriel stood in the doorway of their expanded home, watching as Lily read a story to their 3-year-old daughter, Elizabeth, and their infant son, James. The sound of their laughter filled the house that had once been so quiet, bringing a smile to his face that rarely faded these days. Sweetwater Springs had grown into a proper town, with a train station, a larger school where Lily now served as headmistress, and a blacksmith shop that had become Gabriel's legacy. He had apprentices now, young men eager to learn the craft from the man whose reputation for fine work spread throughout the territory. But his greatest pride was his family, the woman who had faced down injustice with quiet dignity and unwavering courage, and the children who would grow up knowing that standing for truth was worth any risk. As he watched Lily tuck their daughter's hair behind her ear, her simple gold wedding band catching the lamplight, Gabriel remembered the words that had changed the course of his life. They said she asked for it. The cowboy said no, she didn't. Such a simple truth, spoken when others remained silent. Neither of them could have imagined where that moment of principle would lead to justice, to home, to love, to family. Lily looked up, catching his gaze, and smiled the smile that still made his heart race after all these years. "Coming to join us?" she asked, patting the space beside her. "Always," Gabriel replied, crossing the room to take his place in the circle of warmth and light that was, at long last, his home.